Look at this abstract, infinite wave of light attempting to compress into a rigid, finite box. That spatial impossibility captures the defining historical tension of early Christian theology. Exactly how much of the divine essence inhabited the human Jesus of Nazareth? Early factions offered various compromises. Some argued Jesus was a human adopted by God. Others claimed he was a created subdeity. Still others insisted his physical flesh was merely a convincing illusion. The New Testament condenses its rejection of those compromises into a single sentence. You will find it in Colossians 2:9. The dogmatic weight of that verse rests on three specific Greek pillars. We have pleroma, meaning fullness, theotetos, meaning deity, and somatikos, meaning bodily. Parsing the exact mechanics of that first word, the neuter noun pleroma reveals the dogmatic engine driving both two natures Christology and sacramental theology. We cannot rely on lay simplifications or modern mystical assumptions to decode it. We have to start at the strict morphological bedrock of the language. Tracing the lexical history of pleroma locates the specific points where Paul sets the boundaries of God's presence. This traces the linguistic origin of pleroma. At the top, the verb pleroo, meaning to fill. It branches into the adjective pleres and the noun pleroma. Isolating the noun branch, the language points to concrete objects, a torn piece of fabric and a woven basket. In first-century secular Greek, pleroma described literal, physical material used to fill a physical void. A patch sewn onto a torn garment is a pleroma. The leftover bread collected in the disciples' baskets is a pleroma. This concrete baseline clashes with how modern readers approach the text. The word never implies an ethereal aura or a hovering spiritual essence. Instead, the word dictates an absolute concrete totality. Is the exact, unyielding volume of material required to completely eliminate a gap? When Paul applies this noun to God, it rules out fractional divinity. Not a piece of God, not a divine quality, not a representation of God. The pleroma of God explicitly means the undivided, unfractioned entirety of the divine nature. By borrowing a mundane word used for leftover food and fabric patches to describe God, Paul forces his readers to treat divine presence as a measurable, concrete totality rather than a vague mystical concept. Paul's use of this vocabulary serves a polemic function. He is attacking a local heresy in Colossae. Teachers claimed that accessing divine reality required mediation through angels, cosmic hierarchies, or secret knowledge. This illustrates the Gnostic spatial model, a massive boundary representing the divine realm, the pleroma, with a tiny dot representing Christ floating inside. Paul rejects this entirely. His orthodoxy requires an inverted scale. Christ is the massive silhouette, strictly containing the entirety of the divine realm. This is a vital directional difference. Christ is not a small entity residing inside the pleroma. The totality of the pleroma resides entirely inside Christ. This spatial inversion destroys the Colossian heresy's reliance on intermediaries. If the totality of God is localized within one specific person, seeking divine reality by climbing ladders of angelic hierarchies or secret cosmic knowledge is factually bankrupt. Spatial containment in Christ eliminates those secondary ladders entirely. If you have Christ, you possess the absolute limit of the divine. This brings us to the final, most uncompromising boundary condition in Colossians 2:9, the adverb somatikos, translated as bodily. This maps the collision of placing an infinite God into finite flesh. The left Reformed view insists the Son acts outside the body to protect transcendence. The right Lutheran view accepts the paradox. The divine fullness is completely, strictly boxed within the human body. This exact model on the right generates a precise dogmatic term, the communicatio idiomatum, or the communication of attributes. The mechanical output of this concept is absolute union. Whatever Christ does in his human nature, the person doing it is fully God. When the human Jesus weeps, the fullness of God weeps. When the human Jesus dies, the fullness of God is on the cross. Paul's refusal to qualify the word somatikos explicitly forbids theologians from dividing Christ into separate human and divine compartments. This doctrinal structure descends directly from abstract text to concrete liturgical practice. The logic flows from the verse to the incarnation, straight to the physical elements at the communion rail. If the total pleroma of God dwells somatikos in Christ, then the presence of his body implies the co-location of the divine fullness. This specific Christological mechanism is what forces the Lutheran confession of the real presence in the Eucharist. Hermann Sasse identifies the real presence as the mechanical consequence of Colossians 2:9, grounding the doctrine of the supper in the doctrine of Christ's person. This concrete physical delivery of grace carries a profound pastoral application against the modern temptation to seek deeper, hidden tiers of mystical spiritual experience. Because the completeness of God came entirely down into physical matter, God has held absolutely nothing back for an inner circle of the spiritually advanced. The modern search for an ethereal pleroma through inner illumination, through ascetic techniques or emotional highs, is a search for something that does not exist. The ultimate payload of pleroma is a guarantee. The infinite totality of God is delivered exclusively through the finite, physical means of grace.